Hello, welcome back to How to Read a Poem with me. Now, I'm going to be doing some requests today. You've seen the YouTube channel, you've commented on the videos, thank you for that. Now, the first request that one of you have actually told me to do is called The Thread. It's a past year A-level poem. It's written by the female poet Denise Levertov. Now, let's begin. Something is very gently. Now, the title gives you the thread. However, the first word isn't about the thread. The first word actually highlights that this thread, that is something, it's something indefinite. It's something that eludes definition. So building on to that sense of mystery, which the main question wants you to think about. So something indefinite, something we have yet to grasp is very gently, invisibly, silently pulling at me. We don't know what it is. The poet doesn't know what could be pulling at her, but all the poet can feel is its effects. So the effect of something that pulls on the poet is conveyed through a series of continuous verbs. So we have gently, invisibly, silently. So that effect, it's not something very harsh, it's not something very forceful, and that is conveyed through the soft sounds. Invisibly, silently, you can hear the sibilance. So we get a series of verbs to start with, a series of gentle verbs, a series of verbs that suggest this elusive force that the thread is pulling on the speaker. So note the very first line, that adverb also, very. So again, the effect of it is gradual, the effect of it is nonetheless felt, although it's something invisible, although it is something silent. So the moment we try to pin down what it is that the thread represents, what it is that the thread is, in general, it dissolves into a series of abstractions. It dissolves into a series of words that signify something ungraspable, something elusive, something that escapes definition and pinning down. So nonetheless, something is very gently, invisibly, silently pulling at me. Again, we talk about the effect of this thread on the speaker. So the speaker feels it, but the speaker can't put it really into words. We get a dash next in the third line and we think, oh, maybe finally now we might get some definition here. We might expect the poem now to tell us what is the thing that pulls at the speaker. But we don't get that. We get a thread. Well, fine, a tentative definition, a thread. But look at the next line. The enjambment flows into the next line. A thread or net of threads. So, question, is it a thread or is it a net? The metaphors start to get confused. Instead of definition, we get multiplication of metaphors that don't really seek to grasp, that don't really seek to pin down, that don't really seek to define. So is it a thread, a single thread, a thread that might be weak, or is it a net of threads, something that's more interconnected, something that's harder to negotiate with, something that's harder to break away from? So what is it? Is it a thread? Is it a net? How do we know? The effects of the thread are next defined for us: finer than cobweb and as elastic. So the thread or the net of threads is fine. It's finer than cobweb. It's something almost invisible. It's something almost transparent. It's something diaphanous as a cobweb. But you might ask, how might something as fine or fine as cobweb exert such a force on the speaker? And so therefore we see the poem dissolves into a series of contradictions. Again, the message becomes clear. This thing isn't something that can be pinned down easily or that can be maybe encapsulated in words. So therefore, the poem might be an attempt to grasp the ingraspable, might be an attempt to define the undefinable, and that, in a sense, adds to its sense of mystery. We go back to the poem. Fine as cobweb and as elastic. So something fine, but also something elastic, something stretchable, something that exerts some sort of tension, but also something diaphanous, something gentle, something silently pulling at the speaker. So what is it? Again, if the point hasn't been made clear, we don't really know. But the speaker senses something's pulling her, something's working on her. I haven't tried the strength of it. So the poet hasn't really exerted a counter force. The poet somehow lets this thing exert its own force on her. No barb hook pierced or tore me. However, the effect is not something violent. The effect is not something as dangerous as a barb hook that sinks into the flesh, maybe of the speaker. So you want to note the change in the quality of words and what it suggests, i.e. pierced and tore, something that rips, something that tears, versus something gentle, something visible, something silent, something that tugs, but something that can't really be pinned down. So the poet says, it isn't something violent. This thing that's pulling me isn't something that bothers me too much, but I still feel its invisible presence there, pulling me. Was it not long ago that this thread began to draw me, or way back? Again, layer upon layer, we don't get the physical definition of it. It's not clear. That sense of time again is made even more confused. When was the effect of the thread on the speaker felt? Was it not long ago? Did the speaker start to have this sense of consciousness that this thread begins to draw her, begins to pull her away, or way back? When did this pulling start? So again, the sense of time becomes hazy, adding to the physical vagueness of the thread. Again, all implying that sense of mystery. Was I born with this knot about my neck, a bridle? Now again, we talked about metaphors. So you might want to take note the number of metaphors in the poem. First, we start with net. Then we get knot. Then we get bridle. So what is it? Again, to make the point at the start, the poem trades in a series of metaphors that suggest a kind of imaginative multiplication of the implications of the thread without really pinning it down. So was I born with this knot about my neck? A bridle. So knot and bridle, things that restrict, things that confine, things that pull somebody down. We might hazard a guess the poet is thinking about maybe this thread as suggesting her past self, perhaps as suggesting something about identity, something that she can't choose but was born with. But again, it's put forth as a question. So note the series of questions, not rhetorical questions, but questions that seek to dissolve the poem further in this sense of mystery. So, not about my neck. Note the name, Denise Levertov. Could poet be talking about her identity as a female, her vocation as a woman poet, or maybe if you know something about Levertov, you might think about her Jewish heritage. So are these things the things that pull her? Are these things the things that she has to answer to? Note that the thread is drawing her. Note that the thread is urging her to respond in a certain way, to be pulled along with it. So what is she pulled by? So is it a knot? Is it a bridle? Not fear, but a stirring of wonder. So now the poet responds, but it's not an emotional response of fear. It's not an emotional response of rejection. It's not an emotional response of that fear of the unknown, but it's a stirring of wonder. Now, Aristotle says philosophy begins with a sense of wonder, because that sense of wonder makes us start to question. That sense of wonder is the prerequisite for our mental state that allows us to access things we may be unsure of, but things that nonetheless opens new horizons of discovery, of inquiry for us. So ultimately, we get the effect of the thread on the poet, but also this response of wonder, this response of responding to the mystery, wanting to know more. So it isn't fear, it isn't rejection, it isn't that antagonistic response to that thing that's pulling her, but it's a sense of wonder. It makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it, when I thought it had loosened itself and gone. So the poet thinks maybe something that's knotting her, something that's restricting her, something that becomes a bridle maybe has loosened itself and gone. The thread isn't pulling her anymore, but now she starts to feel it. So how do we respond to it? Not fear that she might be pulled down with it, not fear that she might be restricted with it, but that sense of wonder. Again, that sense that she is allowing this thread to pull her to a certain direction. Again, that trip into the unknown. Again, that sense of wonder that perhaps things might be different, that perhaps I can negotiate a sort of new identity, that perhaps I am embarking on a different phase of life, that perhaps I might seek a new definition of self. So, this poem, in sum, perhaps might stand for all these invisible forces, maybe in our lives, in your daily existence, that you might not pay conscious attention to, but nonetheless, when you're inclined to that mood of discovery, to that mood of contemplation, these are the things that pull us. These are the things that we stop and notice. And these are the things that might be portals into the unknown, to open up to new vistas of discovery. So, again, reality and the speaker, or to put it in philosophical terms, the subject and the object. In other words, the subject must be able to respond in a certain way. The subject must be able to feel that sense of wonder in order for that pull to be experienced. And so therefore, the thread, perhaps, and I'm just offering this as a tentative explanation, perhaps the thread could be the things in our lives that pull us, that maybe weigh us down, but these are the things in life that perhaps also call us to some new definition, to some new experience of ourselves and the world around us. And this adds, once again, to that sense of mystery that we can't really know all there is to life. Some things are out of our control, some things escape our definition. But if we are so predisposed, they might lead us on to something that we may not have experienced before, but something that perhaps becomes really important to us. Last thing to note about the form of the poem, look at it. The poem is written in enjambment, so you get a lot of run-on lines. And so last thing to note, it might therefore resemble this tug of the thread. So something's not really definite, but something's being carried on. So thank you for that request. I aim to do more requests, so do comment and suggest other poems that I can do.